Good afternoon and welcome to episode 3, would you believe, of Do More with Less. I'm gonna run through a quick intro to a very special guest while we wait for people to settle and for more of you to make it online. I can see people coming in as we speak. 10 years ago, marketing was relatively, at least, flush with cash. Budgets were generous. Risk-taking was rewarded and growth at all costs was the playbook at the time. Now, though, the game has changed. CMOs are being asked to do more with less. Now, that's fewer people, that's tighter budgets, and that's higher expectations. But how do we actually make that work? Is it still possible to be bold, to create work that stands out and that matters? Well, welcome to Do More with Less, a monthly webinar series with me, Mark Schwakey, author of B2B bestseller Boring to Brave. Each month I'll be talking to B2B marketing's top leaders on the necessary aspects of a Do More with Less playbook. I'm as high as a kite today to be joined by a very, very good friend of mine, Shane Redding, one of the most respected and senior authority figures in B2B marketing. Shane holds a number of board advisory roles with fast growth companies looking to build and exit. She also has multiple client experience with some of the biggest organisations that any of us ever work with, and that's over. I'm guessing here, Shane, what, 2 or 3 decades now?
Yes, I'm keeping quiet on quite how many, Mark, but yeah.
Well, look, we are not looking for any details like that today. We're looking for leadership behaviours and practices. We're looking for answers. This webinar episode is specifically for CMOs, specifically for VPs, for directors wanting to be at that level. We want to know, what are the real expectations of marketing inside the boardroom in a culture of do more with less? How do they think? So let's dive straight in. I'm going to stop halfway through for a quick Do More with Less book club book recommendation and tell you about an exciting new proposition for the Do More with Less webinar series. But for now, Shane, welcome and thank you for your time. Just for context, just to start us off, how much of a gap is there between the way marketing's viewed on the exec leadership team and the way it's thought about and discussed in the boardroom, generally?
Huge, as a generalisation. I think one of the things I see with the organisations that I work with around the world is it depends on your culture. If you're in a tech company, you are used and have the platforms, the processes, and really understand how to measure revenue, you're in a very different place to the majority of the organisations in B2B that I work with, who are still sales-led. Marketing still seen as a support function. This means that there's a very different understanding of what marketing's job is, marketing's role, marketing's function at the board. So actually one of the questions when I start working as an advisor with enterprise businesses is always to ask that question, is to calibrate it and understand what culture am I working in? Because there is no longer no one marketing function which we can say performs the same everywhere. It doesn't.
And do you feel like the board has the more progressive and mature view of what marketing can and should be doing or when you talk about sales-led and marketing support service, is that the view of the boardroom?
In some cases, and it is changing, there is a shift, there is absolutely the board understanding is that marketing's there as a support function. It's not seen as a strategic function, which that's terrifying. So the first thing we have to do is actually explain what we're here to do, what we can do, if we're allowed to do it. But I've worked with organisations where if that's not understood at the board, then you've got a real problem, because actually what you're expected to deliver is very different perhaps from what most marketers would see their role to be, which is actually to be strategic and to create growth, to create markets. That's not happening in many places.
It's incredible to me that in 2025 there are still, perhaps this is naive as far as you're concerned, and perhaps well, no doubt that over the multitude of your experience, you've learned to operate within those boundaries and to still be effective. But it's incredible to me that in 2025 there are still boardrooms, effective boardrooms, relied upon for all that great wisdom and experience and knowledge and guidance, that still work on such a narrow premise of marketing.
We've lost ground. We've lost, I think in some cases, I think I was reflecting on this and thinking about the why. If you are not responsible for leading on price, setting price, if you're not responsible for leading on product, then actually that removes a lot of the levers that you need to operate. And that's actually what's happened. Because the world has become very complicated, those things have been put, particularly in tech firms or even in service industries, is that pricing has been removed from marketing and product sits somewhere else entirely. And I think that's one of the reasons, Mark, that we have a challenge. Now, having said that, be a bit more positive, I'm going to push back on the leading with less, or if you like, doing more with less, because I think I agree. We're being asked to do more with less money, more with less people, possibly more with less tech, although actually, no, there is investment in going into AI, but we have got bloat, definitely in CRM, marketing automation, all those plug-in tools that have just exploded in the last 15 years. That is being contracted, but we are seeing new areas of investment. The interesting one is where I'm seeing a lot more, if you like, more being done, and that is process, the understanding that if marketers, we have two levers. We have to basically be more effective, and there's much more emphasis now, hence the whole podcast series, on being more efficient. And we've not been good at it, and so we've only got ourselves to blame.
That's correct. Okay, so much of what you said rings true. And even in B2C, I understand that price and products were long taken out of the hands of marketeers, and B2B, certainly in my lifetime, it's never been the case unless you can prove your worth. But on the rest of it, I understand. I think the efficiency drive and the process drive, the tech sort of peaked a little while ago, but even now that's being severely scrutinised when come to budget season. So what are the expectations of marketing inside the boardroom in a culture of do more with less? How do they expect it to work? Do they expect some drop-off in... are they looking more for efficiency than effectiveness? Let's start with that.
I think actually it's both, and it is about measurement. And again, it depends on a marketeer's background. I mean, I started as a data marketer, so this is my comfort zone. I've always been happy with this. But if you haven't, then it's hard. It's hard to move into this space. Maybe, been brand or been from some communications. And one of the things I think with experience is you have that helicopter view. And we all know there are some things that are much easier to measure than others. But today, everything is getting easier to measure. And I think the board expectation is you should be doing this. As you say, prove your worth. Now, it's you, the professional, the marketeer, that needs to tell us the KPIs that matter and what they lead to. And they can't always be revenue, particularly in B2B. I mean, I work with organisations, the longest of which was Maersk Drilling, and we worked out the sales cycle for an oil rig was probably between 7 and 15 years. So proving commercial impact, probably the board's not going to be the same board in that time.
Yeah.
So you have to be commercial and go, but what will put us in that place in the future, in the best possible? What's that roadmap to measurement? And I think that's where we've got to be much clearer about measuring not output or activity, not stuff, not campaigns, but business impact.
Let me give you a scenario that might help leaders when trying to put some kind of number by the parts of their job that are important and commercial as far as we're concerned, but as far as the board's concerned, hard to measure and therefore going to get discussed less. It's clearly not enough to turn to a board and say, listen, we need to invest X percentage of our budget and spend and thought and focus into brand awareness, mental availability, all of that Les Binet and Peter Field stuff. I think one way I've tried to conquer it in the past, because it's difficult to put a number on it, is to just turn it into maths in any way I can and put research numbers by it. So insist that part of the budget, however small, goes into some kind of brand awareness play, research, market research, start of every year, and to see where year-on-year movement is, whilst arguing the case for how that lands in terms of long-term revenue strategy. Now, if you can get that second bit right, and you can use all those great maths equations that, you know, I find that if you turn stories into maths, those people you're always fighting against will get it. So if you talk about your share of voice being above your share of market, you're going to grow, and your share of voice being under share of market, you're going to shrink. It feels like one of the only things all of the professors agree on. People are going to get it in a different way. And so if I can grab 7 or 8K to do a small piece of market research, and into the bargain find out some really good competitor and market research that might help sales campaigns, I often find that's a way that some boards can be persuaded. Is there anything else that you can think of that might help those of us that come from that brand end?
Make friends with the CFO. Make them your best friends. And just say, look, this is tough. I need your brains on this. What can we agree if we look back through the financial performance of the last 5 years? Where can we find some relationships? A really good one, and you know, I think it's very interesting. I'm advising clients at the moment, particularly to look at, rather than awareness, to look at brand consideration. You know, further down the pipeline. So not necessarily, it's not about counting those that you reach, it's reaching the ones that count. That focus, marketing has to take the lead on and going, you know, if you want us to do more with less, that means going to less. That might be a bit scary. And it's, as actually, does the board understand that? Do they understand that actually, if you haven't got the budget to do reach, then you're going to have to spend it in a different way. You're going to have to spend it in that middle of the funnel, keeping customers longer, upselling them, cross-selling them. That's where your customer database comes in. Sitting down with the CFO and going, can we measure the health of our customer data? Not about leads, but how engaged are they? What metrics do we have to show that actually in our pipeline, it's a healthy, vibrant, engaged pipeline, that they are considering working with us? That's very different to counting the number of inbound inquiries.
So is it the end for a conversation at the moment about investing in growth and being bold and brave in order to drive differentiation? Are they not just not willing to have that conversation?
No, actually the good news is, because I thought, right, I better see what the latest stats are out there, Mark. Actually, there's a latest benchmarking report. There's two. There's one, an organisation, Propolis, that I work with, from B2B Marketing. And
amazing organisation.
They're fabulous, and I urge all B2B marketers, if you're not part of it, you should be. They benchmark their members, and they benchmark spend. And actually, it's holding steady. It's not all in free fall or decline. And there are areas which are being invested in. I mentioned AI, for example. Sales enablement, you know, it's actually, as you said, it's about pipeline now. But there's another report that's just come out, The Science of B2B, which we can link to in LinkedIn. And this is an American report, very, very interesting, showing that actually budgets are starting to increase again.
Really?
And that's new. I mean, that's like within the last month. But it's not even.
Can you think of a reason why that might be?
AI.
Really?
Yeah, if I put my finger on one thing, because if you're going to be more efficient, the way to do it, we all know, is to invest in AI. But that means testing. It means finding out where you can actually make the savings, but still move the needle on effectiveness and drive better campaigns, because you don't want to use AI to start spamming or turn off your audience.
Yeah.
So, this is why some organisations have set up growth marketing teams to be able to be very agile, hack, test things quickly to make a decision based on evidence and then to be able to invest in it.
I guess that's not the part that boards want to know about. They want to know the end results. They want to know where you've landed, what you've decided, and why it's the right decision, right? They don't want to hear about how they make the sausage, right? But where would you suggest, if you're a CMO and your boardroom is coming to you and say, listen, you don't need to be spending all this money. Let's just get AI into the organisation. There's a as well as the excitement and the opportunity, I think for most leaders of marketing functions, there is a trepidation there's a sick feeling in your stomach at the thought that perhaps people who are so elevated and haven't necessarily got to grips with AI's capability and where it's strong and where it's not so strong are just urging you, dump AI into the business and everything will be all right. It feels like, are they just dumping on me because it's an easy answer?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a question of dumping. I think it's an intelligent conversation that needs to be had at board level in terms of saying, how will we use this? I mean, people costs for most businesses are one of our highest overheads. And therefore, if we can be more efficient with people, that doesn't necessarily mean less people. It means getting better output from them. And I think there's a real understanding that it is people, maybe agentic AI, and then people. So it's people first, AI, then people again. Yeah. But actually, we are so rich in operational data. We've moaned about it for years. We're swimming in the stuff, but we can't access it. AI is a game changer. Yeah. To be able to make the right decisions based on the data we have both in the organisation and external data and linking it. Customer surveys, cost a lot of money. But if you can actually go out using AI and understand and take from social media sentiment data, look at that and bring it with internal data, it's game changing.
Yeah. I think this morning alone, I work with Orbital X, which is a marketing resource group. And this morning alone, in 4 meetings between 9 and 1, I spoke to a construction industry platform, a Shopify subscription play in America, a furniture retail platform, and an amazing company in China that has brilliant data at its heart in disrupting the legacy players in testing, inspection and certification when importing and exporting. You couldn't have found 4 more different industries, and all of our clients have got an AI offer that it's so easy to do the storytelling part for them. It's blowing my socks off. And this is where I'm really, really excited about the opportunities for AI to not just to transform opportunities, but in terms of top-end growth, change, transfer, but to literally tidy up the stuff that has always been a little bit jarring. We understand that we don't have the data flowing in the right way and all of that great stuff.
So you mentioned, Mark, and I love the fact it doesn't need to be a big investment. And you're right, the board probably doesn't need to know, but the CMO needs to be making a decision. How do my people spend their time at the moment? It's the classic old time and motion study that we used to do. And asking that very simple question of your marketing team. And if they're spending masses of time on finding content, a classic example is, we all know it. We go in and we look at content and we know that it's probably out of date with the brand. We go into the sales team and they're using assets which just want to pull your hair out because they're so dated. That is an easy thing to do, is to look at the content that you have, do that audit and come back and actually produce a proper process and template. That's efficient. And actually, as an individual working in a marketing team, that's joyous because it solves a huge headache. So I think for CMOs, what's the problem that you can solve that's possibly, relatively, it's seen as small, but actually it's huge because it releases so much time and it needn't cost a lot of money.
Let me stop you there for 5 minutes. I've got a couple of things I want to do. Firstly, Do More with Less started last month with the most successful book club launch I've ever seen. I'm trying to bring you a library of books that aren't obvious players on your shelf. They're not obvious parts of the marketing canon, so you won't find me talking about books you already have. I want to talk to you about a couple of books that I pick up every single time I go into a second-hand bookshop or a charity shop that specialises in books. There is a guy called Oliver Uberti who does the most incredible things with data.
Fabulous.
Now he's got a huge canon of brilliant work called Data is Beautiful, and these are fabulous compendiums of the most beautiful graphs, charts and images using data. This one I picked up for £2 in a bookshop just the other day. It's called London, the Information Capital. It's 100 maps and graphics that will change how you see the city. Now, firstly, the first thing is to show you some of the beauty of the sorts of charts he is able to put together across a whole range of themes on how we live, where we are, who we are, where we go, how we're doing, what we're interested in, kind of what we do with our spare time, all of that great stuff. But the reason I want to talk about these books, and they can be found anywhere, is because they give me ideas for ways in which to throw different kinds of content into the arena that are going to get you noticed. Beautifully designed, beautiful infographics, but different stories as well. So, not necessarily content and infographics about the thing you're actually selling, but the stories you can tell that are interesting to anyone who might be in your industry just to get noticed. I would absolutely recommend putting, when you've got things like this, I could sit and stare at this all night. My son picked one up just recently. He's absolutely obsessed with transport. He's got a data book of every single metro map in the known universe in every single city in the world. And right now he's that kind of person. He could navigate me across the world if I had a passport and money, but it was completely lost. So I really like books that you can put on your shelf and bring out when you've got time to think, time to breathe between meetings, and you just want to change your headspace and get out of wherever you've been and just clear your palette, if you like, and give yourself a bit of inspiration and ideas. So Oliver Uberti, more about him another time. The other thing I want to talk to you about is you might have noticed that Do More with Less has expanded its repertoire from these 35 to 40 minute interviews with special guests to shorter 15-minute, 20-minute webettes, we're calling them. They're the ones where I talk to a marketing director about a single issue, how they've changed their thinking and their outcomes through a Do More with Less culture and scored a victory out of the jaws of defeat. You'll know those small, short webettes because they're the ones where I have stupidly chosen an intro by playing the guitar. So if you see me playing the guitar, you'll know you're on one of the Do More with Less webettes. Now back to Shane. Let's talk about leaders and leadership. Let's you go into some of the biggest companies in the world and indeed sit on the boards of some of the fast growth companies. And one of the things that you're relied upon to do is to guide leadership. And leadership is changing all the time. We're becoming, well, for a while we were on the trajectory, and I hope it continues, of becoming more attuned to a softer, gentler, more emotional side of leadership that can guide people through a whole host of turbulent times and get the best out of them. But I am sensing some kind of return to command and control in this era of Do More with Less. And I would like to know from you, how should a CMO think differently about roles and responsibilities, their own team, reporting upwards, and being good business people when leading with less?
I'm really glad you referenced that, actually, Mark, because I think, like you, The command and control is an old, outdated, broken approach to leadership. It's how I learnt my leadership. It's not fit for purpose today.
It comes from fear.
Yeah, and it's not what the style that the people that we need to lead understand or want.
Yeah.
So actually this is an area I've been doing quite a lot in. And in fact yesterday I did a session on, for leaders, self-efficacy. Be the best you can be by investing in yourself. Now, one of the challenges we have, all CMOs, is time. And actually what tends to give is actually that opportunity to stand back and go, how can I be a better leader? Now, many will be listening to podcasts like this, reading widely, and I absolutely would echo those books are brilliant and give you, lots of ideas. I adore them, particularly as an ex-geographer. But that reflection, that self-reflection, we do, all the personality tests, the psychometric testing, but they are quite one-dimensional. They often put you in a bucket. What they don't do is necessarily give you the tools to help change and develop. Now that is changing. Obviously there's things like mentoring, there's things like coaching, and great CMOs do those things. One of the interesting areas that I'm seeing, which sort of relates to the point you made about emotional intelligence, is actually reverse mentoring. And I'm starting to see this in a number of large organisations. And I first came across it when I sat on a pro bono board, WizKids, wheelchairs for disabled children. And there they had a board made up of the wheelchair users. It was mind-blowing because they were, in effect, the customers. They saw themselves in a very different way. They saw themselves very proactive and were able to actually say, well, actually, we don't want wheelchairs. You're raising money for the wrong thing. We want to be mobile. That one outcome from that board of, it was between 15 and 20-year-olds, meant a partnership was set up with an amazing part of Red Bull to actually come up with investing in, to start with, the next wheelchair, which became the coolest thing in the playground because you could charge your mobile phone from it. So all of a sudden, the children were actually a centre of attention. Everybody wanted to charge their phones off the chair. And then it's obviously now gone into robotics and actually, being able to move through exoskeletons and things. I think we have so much to learn from outsider organisations, whether that's, working with a charity, or whether it's insider organisations working with the very latest employees. They see the world very differently. So I'm a big fan, and I think something that CMOs should do, is that sort of reverse mentoring. Working with small businesses allows me to go into big businesses and say, this company grew £1 million without a marketing budget last year. No marketing budget. That is the reality. And I think, brand challenges. Slack, that's how Slack started.
Yeah.
That, a black book, no marketing budget, absolutely done purely by word of mouth.
Is that still possible these days?
Absolutely. Even easier.
We what I'm seeing often is a marketing director that's been, or VP or CMO that's been used to, that's grown up with budget, resource, headcount, and everything they needed to do the job, now being stripped of the tools he or she needed or always relied upon and having to make new plans. Now I'm seeing fantastic, brilliant behaviours, innovations, energy coming from that. But on a different side, I'm seeing some marketing execs feeling disenfranchised and feeling almost scalded, and going back and not necessarily understanding how best to lead or inspire or motivate their team. Indeed, sort of turning in on themselves. And what I'm trying to figure out is how Do More with Less as a webinar can help re-energize those people. And I feel like, Shane, I think it's too glib and too kind of pithy to say, find the startup within yourself and, all this.
Yeah.
We need proper playbook material for these people. What can you suggest? What reflections do you have?
So one playbook I'm seeing working, and it is glib, but actually there's normally a sort of germ of truth in that sort of flip answer. One playbook that's absolutely working, and it needn't be marketing budget. And I think one of the challenges and one of the reasons, as you say, there's this huge weariness and ground down, is because actually it's not just our money anymore. It's not just marketing, but we can go and work and find money in other parts of the organisation. And a really good example of that is employee advocacy. Employee advocacy very rarely comes out of the marketing budget.
Talk to me about employee advocacy here.
So, this is the same idea as word of mouth, but instead of your customers doing it, your employees do it. Your employee, instead of it just being a sales team, it's everybody in the organisation becomes an advocate for the business and is empowered, this is the key word, to do it. This is not command and control. You've got to tell people to do this. You have to train them to do it. You have to explain what's in it for them. They have to want to do it. They have to love to do it. But actually, if you love your job and you're really proud of what you do, and you're comfortable because you've been taught how to share it appropriately, it's great.
Yeah. We used to talk about turning your entire organisation into a 50-strong marketing team rather than a 5-strong marketing team. It's hard to do if the product people or the client people or the techies don't necessarily see it as their job. But I have had a little bit of luck. Track record in turning some people round. There was mention me. I had a tech team that was nowhere near under me and didn't ever expect to cross paths with marketing, but I was kind of annoying and bullish about wanting to get their take and get their feedback. And I remember one of the most gifted, talented product. Was he an engineer or a developer? I think he must have been an engineer, but he was there when the company started. And I'd never met this guy because he was never in the office. He always worked from home, and he was kept himself to himself. And I'd sent him the odd Slack message and included him on the odd email. I'd never got response, and he was classic sort of engineer man. And the first time I met him, he came to me a little bit inebriated at the Christmas party, and he introduced himself. I said, "Hey, how are you doing? We meet at last." And he sat me down and said, "Listen, I need you to know." I said, "Go on." He said, "I absolutely hate you." I was like, "Good, okay, cool, good start. Let's. I mean, that's something to build on, isn't it?" He said, "But I absolutely hate you. I still don't really understand why you send me all the stuff you do, include me on all the messages and the communications, tell me excitedly about the campaigns. But I'll tell you this, if I ever started my own company and I needed a marketer, I'd come for you." And I was like, "Well, do you know what? Happy Christmas, that's enough. That is a good start." But yeah, turning them all into advocates.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating, and this is where this is why I love being a marketer, because it's about understanding how the world's changing.
Right.
And actually, recently in the Financial Times, apparently 40% of Gen Z wish to be an influencer. Well, let them be one then, but just in your organisation. I was speaking to a very, very impressive German e-commerce business in B2B, which is unusual. We've been very slow to get to e-commerce, which again is one of my pet peeves. And I said, "Well, how do you recruit great people, particularly, to create inbound inquiries for tech?" And they said, "Oh, it's really simple. Just go and find people who've already got their own e-commerce business as a side hustle. And then we use them as a fractional worker." So thinking differently about our teams, thinking differently about the resources. And I know, speaking to CMOs, one of the biggest challenges, we need these new skills. You can train people, but you can also think differently. And it's very interesting, that's the world that you're moving into more, is that that resource and the way we build our teams
Yeah.
It's changed forever. And I think smart CMOs are already looking at that. They're saying, okay, I can't take on extra overhead, but how do I find that talent? And I might only need it for a small period for a project. I might not need it after that. How do I upskill my team? All of that.
That's true.
That's when you can get excited again as a CMO and go, actually, this is an opportunity absolutely to do more with less or to do more differently.
At Orbital X, we have these 4 different practices of skill sets and teams that can work together or drop in as projects, like you said. But the thing we pride ourselves on is our uncommon thinking. And I think about what that means. A friend of mine who's my peer grew up with me, same age, and we both have children. And her children are a little bit older than mine, and so she's got one who's approaching 16. I was talking to her the other day, and I said, "What does he want to do? What's he interested in?" And her face kind of dropped, and she said, "I'm a bit worried. He basically wants to be an entrepreneur." And I said, "What does he mean by that?" And she said, "I don't know. He doesn't know. He's just seen them on YouTube. He wants to be an entrepreneur or an influencer." And I said, "What does that mean to you?" And she said, "Well, the problem is he doesn't have any business experience. He doesn't have any life experience, but he's seen this as a career now. I want to be an entrepreneur." And you kind of go, well, that is now a career option for these kids. It's not like all of them are going to make it. Yeah. It's that, there are people and the people who make it and the people who are making very, very good money and good livings out of it are those that have succeeded. You don't get to see the ones that are still struggling, but that is now a career option. And to that end, when I think about it, we sent our kids to a lovely little school in a state school in London. But the thing that really got us was when we were going around seeing schools, which was a nightmare affair, because it's like, what influence am I about to have on my child's future? The thing that really got us was, we don't know what half of these kids are going to do, because the jobs they're going to do aren't invented yet. We don't know what they're going to need to know. So we're going to do 2 things. We're going to teach them to learn about how to learn and critical thinking. And the other thing is, we're going to teach them in today's world how and why to take calculated risks and not be scared. And that was the thing that got us. And these youngsters that are coming in at the young end of our organisations, I guess CMOs have to learn to harness that energy and that ambition.
They do, and I think also understand that means that perhaps what they want from a job is not a career. They don't see necessarily that they're going to stay with an organisation. And that's a big challenge for CMOs, is that the shape of what they're building, you have to say and look at your talent. If I'm lucky, I may keep them for 2 years. I mean, and that's not very long to get a return on an individual. But what will keep them is giving them those entrepreneurial opportunities, sort of talking to them about, right, this is yours, you own this is how you're going to, you can lead on this. And it's really interesting. I go into schools, exactly the same experience, and talk about a career in marketing. And they all, because they've watched Dragon's Den and they've watched The Apprentice, there is absolutely an ambition to do that. And there isn't a fear, which is brilliant. And some of the side hacks that people who often have done that at school, setting up a business, they can bring that in and teach the rest of us, and particularly regarding media and how best to use it. And they're using it in a very different way. And I think that's really exciting. Video production. I met 2 amazing chaps who were, I think, in their early 20s, going down on the train to London, and me being me, started chatting to them because they got this really impressive camera. And I said, are you professional videographers? Oh, no, I'm a systems developer, and he's an electrical engineer. And I went, well, why have you got this camera kit? Oh, we're going down to this trade show in Excel, and it's really interesting. It's on renewable energy and batteries, which is what our startup company does that we work for. And we asked our boss, would he mind if we walked round and did a talking head video? And the boss went, yeah, you can have the whole day. Go and do it. Doesn't have a marketing team. Gave them and bought them extra camera equipment.
Shane, do you know what you've done today? You've filled me with hope and a great deal of optimism. So I come to you for guidance, experience, any kind of tidbit I could get out of you, just because you are one of our leading thinkers in B2B marketing. But I think I came into this conversation today with a sense of trying to pick up the pieces and you know, from a gloomy landscape for leading marketing. For marketing leaders, just in an era of do more with less, what you've managed to talk about and cover is process. You've talked about technologies. You've talked about the different kind of people that are coming up with a different energy and a different optimism that if marketers and leaders can harness and get their heads around, there's ample opportunity. But you've talked largely about, I suppose, the tactics and strategies we need to be effective and move things forward under the hood, so that we can take the only thing that matters up to the boardroom, which is results.
Yes, absolutely. Brilliant summary.
You seem very positive.
I am very positive. I think because, to be honest, in my career, I have been there before. You know, we've had doom and gloom before. End of direct mail, end of email. You know, recession before. But the ability, our human ability, came through the pandemic, you know, to reinvent ourselves for those who are up for it. And I do think it's exhausting. I don't want to downplay in any way those who are listening to this who do feel ground down. I do not live in the corporate world. If I had to, that was my world, I'd be ground down. But actually, we all have choices. Don't have to stay there. There's other things you can do. And I think that either take on the challenge and find your way through it and make the change, because it is up to us to make it, or say, I don't have to do that, I'm going to do something else.
Shane, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much for your time. We're going to be talking again, I'm sure. We're both involved in a very, very exciting project that's not going to see the light of day until the summer at the earliest, but I expect we'll hear from you again. Thank you for joining me on Do More With Less. And for everybody that's stuck with this session, we haven't got time for questions. I've taken the liberty of optimizing Shane's time, so I promise you, if you send in questions, I will try and get them to Shane and see if we can tempt her onto email to answer them. Thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you on next episode of Do More With Less.